It's all the stuff. It's this lifetime of memories. It's the salt and pepper shakers that mom collected with dad for 60 years on every one of those trips they took in the RV. And you have shelves of them in the dining room, in the kitchen, and in the basement, there's 12 more boxes or totes filled with them, right? And these are the things that we're grappling with as humans about, like, these all equal memories.
Hey y'all, this is Kosta, and today I'm here with my guest, Ben Rayo, co-founder of Mom's House, best-selling author of Paying for Long-Term Care, The Essential Guide to Understanding and Funding Senior Care, and Senior Living Advocate. Featured everywhere from CBS, NBC, and Fox, Ben's primary mission is to alleviate the emotional and financial struggle that families face when unexpectedly confronted with the reality of transitioning into senior care. Today, we're discussing the myths and misconceptions about selling your home to transition into long-term care. So, Ben, I want to set the scene. What does the traditional transition process look like for someone selling their home and moving into long-term care?
Kosta, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate that. And, it's great to figure out different ways that we can get the message out to help families. That's part of the reason why I wrote the book. It just seems like so many people need so much help. So let's look at the traditional path. So today, our families aren't having the conversations they should be having. They don't want to talk about that, what level of care or if mom's going to need care at some point. So a lot of things go unanswered until we have this emergency where mom falls for the second time, or we notice that from 4th of July to Thanksgiving, there's a really big change in mom's health, but whether it's cognitive or whether it's physical, but there's something different and we're noticing it. And so now we're pressed sometimes with a lot of urgency because of mom fell and she's being discharged from a hospital to go to skilled nursing or maybe even assisted living. And the family's trying to figure out all the different moving parts. They don't want to make mistakes. And many times mom doesn't have the money to pay for care, but what she does have is a lot of equity in the house. Sometimes it's the forever home, right? It's the forever home. Dad died 8 years ago. Mom's been doing the best she can living in the house to keep it up. It's not been maintained. There's a lot of things happening. It's filled with a lifetime of memories and stuff, from the shed to the garage to the basement and all these things, still have the kids' rooms. All those things are all happening, right? And so now the family, the adult children that might be in their 60s or 70s, who are spread all over the United States, on average over 400 miles away, are trying to figure out, what are we supposed to do? I don't want to make a mistake. This is a really stressful, important decision. And they've got all these different people coming at them from the care community that's telling them, oh my gosh, this is going to cost $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 if you're looking something like memory care. The adult child, there's usually one that's responsible that stayed behind, and they're stuck holding the bag, so to say, of taking care of mom and being that number one. And then you and I are brothers, and we're questioning everything our sister's doing and all the things that she's doing about mom's care because we're not there locally. I dealt with this with my stepfather, Tom, 7, 8 years ago now. And I was driving back and forth from Kansas City, where I live now, to Louisville, where I grew up. And you've got all these different dynamics happening. And then the family's like, oh my gosh, it costs so much money. And so now they're trying to figure it out. And the house is a huge component of somebody's wealth. And today, and traditionally, it's been, this is amazing. Senior living is pushing their customers away. I liken it to, think of a car dealership. And when you go to buy a new car, many times you have a car and the dealer wants to buy your used car so they can sell you a new car. This is the same thing that's happening in senior living. Someone is trading their forever home for a new house, a new place to live. And so, but the senior living industry doesn't buy the used car. They push their families away and say, go find a real estate agent. And when you get it sold, come back when you have your money so you can move in. Here's where the stressor really is that traditional route, a real estate agent, there's plenty of times that's a great fit. But many times it's not the best fit for the family in this situation, no matter what the condition of the house, for a lot of reasons. So the agent says, clean the house out. Step number one. So now you and I and sis have to figure out what we're going to do with all the stuff. Mom's downsizing from 2,500 square feet and all the stuff that she's had for 85 years to, 150 square feet. That's the first step. So that adds time, effort, stress. Then it's, if you'll do these three things, and fix the house up with these three things, you'll get top dollar. So as consumers, we're like, oh my gosh, I want to get the most money I can. That makes sense. So now I've got to get some bids for the roof, and I've got to get the hot water replaced. And they said I should replace the shower, and all of this is going to make my house sell faster, and I'm going to get the most money I can. Then the next step is, after all that happens, which could take months, the house gets listed and it gets sold, and then the family has to pay a 6% commission to an agent, which can be a really big amount of money. I mean, if you look at a $300,000 or $400,000 house, I mean, that could be $20,000, $25,000 plus thousands of dollars in closing costs. And this has been the route that senior living has had, and families have known nothing, that there weren't any other options. And we said there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a way to take the stress from the family. And that's why we built Mom's House. And that's part of those misconceptions. And I know we're going to go through some of those, so I don't want to get too detailed in each of those steps. But that's what's happening today. And it's crazy because the family can end up with about the same amount of money in 3 or 4 weeks than going the route with all that stress, effort, putting money out of pocket, borrowing money, doing repairs, paying commissions, and do that 3 to 4, maybe 5 months later. And we've been in a really hot real estate market. As you know, you live in Nashville, which is smoking hot. Everybody's leaving California to go to Nashville, and they're selling $2 million homes and overpaying for that $750,000 home in Nashville. And it's crazy market, but it is slowing down. It's slowing down. Some of the hottest markets have started to stall a little bit, and some of the markets where they're not impacted with such high and low demands are starting to slow down with days on market. And the concern is if you've been around senior living at all for the last 12 years or consumer, you've known nothing but an amazingly hot real estate market, right? The hottest, on fire, where put a sign in the yard and people are going to overpay and they don't care about what the condition of the house is. That's going to be a thing of the past as we start to trickle into, I don't want to say recession, but a decline, days on market. Interest rates are going up. Inflation is impacting, the cost of goods to be able to do rehabs. All those things put a lot of pressure on the family that they don't realize. And senior living doesn't know. This is a big wave of people coming out that if it slows down to sell a house, it slows down getting mom moved into care, whether that's moving into assisted living or memory care or into in-home health care, right? We got to keep mom safe. If mom has a fall, we can't keep mom safe, then that we know what those statistics look like as far as from those falls or things that mom's, life span is going to drop off.
Could you start at like step one of how Mom's House works and kind of take us through from start to finish, what the process looks like? And I want you to really focus on telling our audience how you're reinventing the long-term care transition process, because as I know, and I'm sure a lot of people that have been through the process understand, it is filled with pitfalls and confusion, a lot of heartache, and it's also, it really is, and like you were saying, the house being kind of the highest, the most valuable asset that most people have. Why don't more people consider the equity in a home for long-term care expenses?
I think they do. The challenge is just that they don't know anything else besides what a traditional route is of what I just described earlier. That transition for a family member, there's a lot of emotional resistance in addition to that financial resistance. And what we found out was very quickly that the house is a hurdle, and the stuff, it's all the stuff. It's this lifetime of memories. It's the salt and pepper shakers that mom collected with dad for 60 years on every one of those trips they took in the RV. And you have shelves of them in the dining room, in the kitchen, and in the basement, there's 12 more boxes or totes filled with them, right? And these are the things that we're grappling with as humans about, like, these all equal memories. And so, if you have something really, really amazing and valuable and really special, sometimes this is a little hack here. Sometimes taking a photo of that and having it framed nicely to put it in mom's room if she's transitioning into senior living is one way to still be able to have that memory, and still be able to connect to those things when you don't have all the room. But so at mom's house, what we did, we wanted to try to eliminate all these different hurdles or objections or stressors that the senior has, because we know that when senior gets to a healthier care, and after they get over that hurdle of resistance of moving into, let's just say assisted living, now there's medication management and nutrition and socialization. And they realize, oh my gosh, I wish I'd done this 6 months ago. I didn't know what I was missing. But in their mind, they're getting over this emotional hurdle of like, this is the fourth quarter, right? This is the final step for me. And you're not going to put me in a home, right? You're not going to put me in that home, and that they're being left behind and thrown aside and not valued. And so, I mean, that's all really scary stuff. Now, I have seen some amazing assisted living places that I'm ready to go to now. They're so cool, right? I saw one that was on Long Island recently that was on the end of Long Island and very expensive, by the way. But they had a beach on one side and a cliff that sat with chairs to look out over, and they did independent living and assisted and memory care and skilled nursing. But I mean, there are people that are in the senior living industry doing an amazing job to provide like a really great service product experience for seniors transitioning into care.
Not to get off topic, but like, how much does an assisted living facility like that cost a month?
You know what? It could be all over the place. If you talk about, you could have something that could be $10,000 or $12,000 or more a month. And then you also can have something that's $3,000. I mean, you're talking about Medicaid at that point, right? That's a Medicaid community.
So step 1 to step 5.
So, step 1, when the family's starting to look at this, they're figuring out how they're going to pay for it. They don't know about a lot of things. That was part of the reason, again, why I wrote the book, was that families don't understand all the different options there are to pay for care. A lot of people that are veterans don't realize there's something called VA aid and attendance. And if you served in an active war, you didn't have to go to that war. You could be in Oklahoma working at the base, and if it's an active war, you still count that we were there. And I'm really cutting through a lot of the details here, but that VA aid and attendance may give you a few $1,000s a month of a benefit to thank you for serving our country. And it's also, what's really sad is that it doesn't get, a lot of times it doesn't get announced to, or the spouses don't know about it. And this extends to the spouses as long as they didn't get remarried. And again, you need to talk to a VA, benefits company. We've got lots of relationships with great companies that help people to do those kinds of, that kind of paperwork to help them to qualify. So, but that's a great example of something that gets overlooked. If dad died 8 years ago, spouse has no idea, not even to know to ask about anything related to VA when dad served in Korea, right? And so, they're not asking these questions. And so just trying to get your bearings, if I could give any advice to families, it would be have the conversation sooner versus later about the finances, put it on a spreadsheet, put a list of what they have, understanding what they have. If you have a house, getting that house into a trust 5 years earlier has it exempt from the Medicaid stuff. Again, not giving any advice here. You need to talk to a Medicaid expert. But there's a look back period of 5 years. If they look back 5 years and that house was in the trust for 7 years, they're not going to count that as an asset. So there's things like this that families just don't know. People can convert life insurance policies. Obviously the house is a huge piece of that, and that's what we work with. Our goal is to go in and how do we just eliminate any of the stress or hurdles for families and give them the right information to understand that this is a really good option, and it's nothing more than an option. There's no obligation, but we will come out and meet with you. One of our transition specialists meet with you face to face in your home and come out and give you an option to be able to buy the house as is. You don't have to fix it up. It doesn't matter that the basement's flooded 3 times. It doesn't matter if there's a foundation issue. It doesn't matter if it's a $1.5 million home and somebody's just values time over money and they don't want to deal with any of it. Because the other thing that we can do is help with the stuff. And so now when we get in that stuff conversation, families think it's going to be easy to get through the stuff. That's one of the misconceptions, right? You and I say we're going to show up on a weekend, and you and I and sis are going to clean it out, and we're going to get it all taken care of. And we open up a photo album, and what happens? We lose 3 hours, and now it's Saturday at noon, and now we ordered a pizza, and now it's 1:30, and we've made very little progress on what we're doing in figuring it out. And so families think this is that misconception. We can do this in a weekend. We can do it quick. We can paint in a weekend. We can do all these things, and then they realize it takes a lot longer. I don't know if you've ever had any honeydews or anything that you want to do around your house, and you say, I'm going to get it done this weekend, and it ends up stretching over 2 or 3 weekends because you ran out of time, get busy, distracted, real life stuff.
So, Ben, what systems are you putting in place to ensure the best outcomes for clients? And also, how does that differ from the traditional methods?
So the difference is we are focused specifically in the senior living industry. We are a tool or a service for families and the senior living industry. We have a training center that we do a certification and training where people have to come in for 3 full days. They go through that. They exit out of that as a senior transition specialist. We have an ethics agreement that they sign and agree to. We have ongoing continuing education where we have 8 to 9 Zoom calls a month that are training and education. We talk and teach a lot about empathy and what's happening at that flashpoint with the family, not necessarily the real estate piece of that, because this is really about the sensitivity needed to help the family and help and understand where they're really going through and where they're coming from.
Right. So there's an important statistic that I think we need to address, and it kind of ties in with how many families you see kind of day in and day out that are going through these struggles. So 70% of Americans over the age of 65 will access the long-term care market. What's the best way to prepare for the nearly inevitable event of requiring care?
I would say the number one thing is communication. It's communication with the other, with your children, with your siblings, with your parent, with your loved ones, to have those conversations. In the Paying for Long-Term Care book, I put together a roadmap or a guide just to say, follow these steps, right? They're not complicated, but it's like, you got to have these conversations. And there's a lot of downloads and cheat sheets that are on the Paying for Long-Term Care website, but to download and say, how do I figure out what my assets are? You have to know what assets you have to know what you can pay for, right? So if you go look at these beautiful, communities and it's $10,000 a month and you can afford $4,000, that's a terrible feeling or a takeaway. That's another reason why we built Mom's House. You see a lot of the iBuyer stuff with Open Door and Open House and Zillow and all these companies, these iBuyers that go out and say, we'll buy your house and give you a quote right now. The problem and the challenge with that, we're kind of the anti-iBuyer because we're in the hugs and kisses business, right? They're in a transactional business to say, here's your offer. And then when they start getting into a due diligence period, their offer many times is being dropped down. There was a huge lawsuit recently, about some predatory practices. When we're in to buy a house, we're going to buy it and we're going to give you, here's what we're buying it for. It's going to be as is. There's not going to be changes to that. That's what we're buying it for. And we can close in 3 weeks. So then you can get mom moved into care. We've many times had to do letters to say, hey, we're in the process of buying this house. We've closed a house in as little as 9 days because it was an emergency and mom needed to get the care quickly. So that's the difference because there's no agents involved. There's no timing, none of those things. There's no clean out. There's no fix up, none of that. We now get mom moved into care much faster. And while all that other stuff's going on, we talk about that families, the misconception is they can go out and find a good contractor. Good luck. And a lot of contractors are going to ask for 50% down, and then you never hear from them again. And maybe the family's borrowing money. They think that a bridge loan is maybe the only option out there to be able to get, and it's not necessarily the case. You don't necessarily need a bridge loan. A bridge loan fits well in a lot of cases from a standpoint of we need to get money in and we can get mom moved in right away while we're having to deal with some other things, with the family. So I don't want to knock a bridge loan by any means. Families think that may be the only option, and it's not.
How in the world did we get to a place, and we're going to talk about how the industry is going to evolve in the next 10 years, but I want to focus on first how we got here. How did we as an industry or as a society or as a country, however you want to frame it, get to a place to where there are no resources but the most elaborate and interesting and, I mean, honestly, valuable assets and programs to pay for something that is essentially an inevitability. Because this problem, obviously, it's much more extreme now in terms of people aging and the baby boomer population aging. But in the past, people have always been aging. So how is it now that we don't have any of the resources unless people like yourself can develop a product and a company and have sort of the touchstone to be able to execute it effectively? Because if it's not for you, most of the times people are completely on their own.
They are, and there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think some of it is we've got this huge baby boomers coming at us, and I think next year or the year after, we're kind of like all those baby boomers are hitting that age of 80, I think that is, and so it's that's a huge wave, and that's part of the pressure. People are living longer. We're having healthier lifestyles. We're not smoking. We're exercising. We're eating better. So that life expectancy is growing. I think culturally there's a big difference too. I mean, I think that if you look in other countries, they look at a senior as an elder or something that's like, I don't want to say that's a positive piece. And many times that seniors is living with the family. Go to Asia or India. They're not putting mom into assisted living. They're not putting, mom are living there. And in those cultures, a lot of times they're living older, and I have no idea if this is true. This is anecdotally like that those cultures are have a higher life expectancy. They're eating healthier. They're living healthier. It's just a different lifestyle. And now, we're spoiled as Americans to have all our great resources and things in the lives that we live. And, I think assisted living and, independent living and memory care, and these are all things that we need and have to have, and we don't really have a choice, but we don't have enough beds. There's not going to be enough beds. The demand, I just sat through the NIC conference, which is, and an economist was speaking about all these different pressures we're going to have, right? The least amount of people working, birth rates are dropping way down. We've got, now we're getting the baby boomers up to this point of 80 years old, and there's just not going to be enough, because this was about like, should people build more senior living? And then the economy and mortgage rates and all these things are all putting this weird pressure. We're at a weird time for big money to come in and to invest in senior living. And so, I think all that's going to impact. You start seeing things like residential assisted living. I'm leaving this afternoon. I'm flying out to Phoenix. I'm out for 2 days at a conference. It's the National Residential Assisted Living Conference. These are people that are actually buying houses and creating assisted living, but maybe it's only 6 bedrooms. And so it's much more down to, grassroots and much more, you said it earlier, a group home, or, depending on which state you're in, they call them different things, right? And so there's like 700 or 800 people at this conference, and many of these people either own them or considering it. A lot of people look at it and think that's a real estate play when they're really getting into the care business. And so there's, sort of things around that. But I think it's things like that. I'm seeing a lot of stuff about tiny homes, people dropping tiny homes on their property and that mom can live in and not necessarily live under the same roof. And then the far extreme I'll take is my mother, who is 75, and she worked a non-for-profit in the senior space for, 40 years or 50 years. So she has a long-term care policy that's like she way overpays for, which I'm like, yay, go mom. But she also lives in a building that has an elevator and that there's other people there, and they're condos. And, she thinks, okay, I think at some point I'll probably just get a reverse mortgage and just burn through all my equity, not because of the urgency, because that's just a way for her to do that. I'm like, that's great, mom. It's your equity. I'm not expecting anything. You go use it to go take trips to England or wherever you want to go, or do whatever you want to do, or get new furniture or a new sliding glass door or whatever you want to do that makes your life better.
So, I mean, what do you say to people that, since the 20th century, we've kind of had this topic of inheritance, and obviously there is no inheritance for people that need to access long-term care because they typically spend all that money, paying for care. And so, talk a little bit about that. And also, I want to hear your thoughts, and you touched on it briefly, about what care looks like in the next 10 years and how we're going to be able to meet that supply and demand imbalance that you were describing.
Well, I think as in-home healthcare and different services for people to be able to age in place and stay in their home is a huge strategy on how we help to solve this problem, right? If we're relying on the government for Medicaid and Medicare programs to help us with our health, what does that mean when we don't have a lot of people working, and that 20% of the population's over 65, 20% of the population's under 18, and that we need 20% of the population to take care of those people. And now we've only got 40% left. That's creating all the money and taxes and all the things that we need. I mean, it's a big problem, and there's a lot of really smart people trying to fix that. And I'm encouraged by technology, and even it feels like COVID even forced some technology and some innovation in the senior space, as far as there's a lot of really interesting sensor type programs, meaning you can put something in the home and it's watching patterns, and there's AI behind it, and it's trying to figure out, this is mom's pattern. Normally she's up every day between 7:05 and 7:20. Why is mom not out of bed as much, or what's happening, or moisture sensors in the bed for UI and those kinds of things. And there's a lot, the fridge sensors. Did it open? Did it close? Mom, are you eating? Yes. Yeah, I had milk and cereal this morning. Well, the fridge didn't open. There's medication, sensors on medication. And so it's like, I think there's a lot of technology in home that's going to help us to figure this out, alongside with, we need physical places for people to live. But
do you think that technology is the answer? Do you, because you're in the industry, you're around it, you understand the challenges, and you see some of the solutions. You talked about the residential homes. That's essentially what I do in Tennessee. Can people afford it? No. Is it funded primarily by Medicaid? Yes. The majority of the people, I think, can't afford to access the long-term care space and pay out of pocket for it at the same time without having something like Mom's House to be able to sort of peel back that equity.
Really, we're moving from point A to point B, right? We're living our forever home, and we're moving into another home. And so it's just, again, we're just transferring that equity over to help pay for the house and the care. The nice thing about, things like assisted living or the residential assisted living is that, you've got your rent component, which you have in your home, but you don't have any maintenance. You don't have any of those things to worry about. You've got the care to keep mom safe. You've got that socialization where a lot of them, as you know, have a game room and some activities and other things, and a chef that maybe can tailor a little bit better to the taste and the people that are there. And so those are really appealing in my mind, but that's for me versus, the big box. And the big box have more amenities. They have more things. They have more activities. So, it kind of depends on, they have a beauty salon.
Can you speak on, and we talked about it briefly before the episode started, about how you can use your services and also age in place without having to go to any assisted living or nursing home or anything. But please talk on that, because I think that that's such an interesting component.
Yeah, Kosta, thank you for bringing that back up, because I did overlook that. So as we know, a strategy is possibly aging in place, and that's using, home health care, resources in-house. And so if that's a consideration, which it is for a lot of people because they're not ready to move or don't want to move, right? It could be that they're looking, they're planning, they're thinking, they could be in denial. And so when they're looking through these things, we have the ability to come out and buy the house, just like I described earlier, and close in a number of weeks, but then let mom stay in the house. So we call that our sell and stay. From a really simplistic perspective, we're buying the house, and then mom is now renting, or she's a resident to live in the house, but she doesn't have to move. All her stuff's there, but then we unlock that equity. And it can be structured a lot of different ways. Mom may pay rent. She may not pay rent. It may be reflected and it's included for some amount of time. So I don't want to get into the weeds as far as the structure, but the idea is that we can get mom money to help pay for care, and mom can stay in her house for some period of time.
Well, Ben, can we touch on the recession just briefly? Because I know you brought it up a little bit when we were talking, and you did say how expensive care is, and obviously everybody has to pay for care unless they're living with family members or loved ones, or I guess somebody that's a friend that's willing to provide the care for free. You recently spoke on the 700 Club podcast about the current housing recession and how this impacts older Americans and their families. What does this recession mean for those entering the transition process today?
I'd like to reword it and not necessarily call it a recession. I don't want to be like Ben Rayo said, we're in a recession. But I mean, I'm just looking at what economists are saying and what they're doing, and we are in a slowdown. There's no denying that. There's no denying the housing market slowing down. And that house, as we've talked about, is the biggest component to help people pay for care. So this is, and when the market slows, we still provide a tremendous amount of value. And back in 2008, if you remember when we had that housing crash, the houses that weren't selling were the houses that needed updating. And most of the time, mom's house needs updating. It is grandma clean, right? She's got avocado stove, avocado free. It's all perfect. All the chrome is in the kick plates. Now it looks brand new. She didn't even peel the plastic off of it, right? And so it's in perfect shape. It's just not. I'm not going to move into a house as a consumer and want to keep that, right? That cycled 8 years ago, and now it's back out again, right? It's so, these are the things that we can provide value to. So when we buy the house, we know that we can do things. I talked to one of the misconceptions is that families think that if they go and replace and do all this work, that they're going to get 100% plus of their money back. So what I mean by that is if you spend $10,000 to do some of the things to fix up the house to make it more valuable, on average, you're only going to get about $6,000 of value back. So the family's putting $10,000 in, going through the stress of fixing it up, and then they're only getting $6,000 of value out of it, meaning they lost $4,000. And this is not something that I made up. Costversusvalue.com is a 20 years of gathering data on remodeling by city, by zip code and city. So it's a fun exercise to go put your own zip code in or your own city and go look by that and go see it with inflation and some of the changes just in the last 2 years. We've seen it go from mid 60s in some markets down to 52%. So now mom's only getting half of her money back. And that's only $10,000. If you go and put a roof and you go do these other things, they may be getting you over the hurdle of getting the house sold, but you're not getting all your money back, and you're adding time and effort. And if you had to go borrow that money, credit card, loan from a friend or whatever that is, now you're paying interest on losing money, and that's compounding, and then time, and now you're paying a 6% commission on the higher sale price, and you start to put all that together, and that's why it makes so much sense to just at least consider to say, hey, what are my options to have somebody just hit the easy button and take care of all this in 3 weeks for me, and they're going to help with the stuff.
So Ben, you don't think that a recession is going to severely impact people's ability to have money to pay for long-term care?
I actually do think it's going to impact them in a couple different ways. And I'll circle back on why, though, where we talked about why we fixed that. One is we've had this crazy real estate market, right? And everybody's houses are appreciating. They have more equity, which is great, which means they have more money to pay for care. But now we're seeing that kind of drop off or flatten out, and it's becoming harder to sell the house. And now families may have refinanced at some point because they have more equity and they can go pull some money out for other things, or that the family, for some reason, thinks they have a lot more money, and so they're making decisions to move into certain levels of care or certain places based on, well, the house is worth $400, and really now the market, it's only worth $365. Doesn't sound like a lot, but $25,000 could be another 4 or 5 months. I'm trying to find some more. I just posted this on LinkedIn this morning. I'm asking some of the other colleagues in the senior living industry about, hey, who's got any updated white papers or information about that lifespan? Because usually it's about 2.5 years, right? It's about 2.5 years is the average lifespan for a senior when they move into a level care. And that changes depending on whether we're talking assisted living or memory care or skilled nursing. So I don't want to get into those details, but on average. So, we start doing the family's doing the morbid math to say, how much money are we going to need for mom for these next 28 months, right? And they're starting to do the math. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of money. Mom only has $45,000 in pension. Mom may only have $80,000 of equity in her house. Now, if she goes through that in the first year and a half, how does mom pay for care? And we know, that's the whole purpose of having, Medicaid there to help people that don't have the resources to make sure that we're taking care of our seniors. But it's scary. And so that decline in value means there's less money for them to have for care. But what I will say is that at Mom's House, there's still value for us to buy the house kind of no matter where it is in the market. And so getting them unlocked and making sure they're not overspending on things like commissions and those upgrades that they're not going to get all their money back is really, we're trying to educate an $87 billion industry about like, hey guys, I know it's been done like this for the last 40 to 50 years. Stop pushing your customers away and let's put some resources in the hands of families that can reduce their stress and help them through this transition.
I want to ask before we wrap, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned from helping hundreds of families across the United States during such a vulnerable stage of life?
I think the biggest lesson, and really we tried to teach and make sure our transition specialists understand, I think the biggest lesson is having patience. We all live in this world that we want everything instantly. We want it now. And that these families aren't in the same timelines as that we are a care community, a transition specialist, even the traditional real estate agent, our transition specialist. These families have a lot of decisions. And this is like, we weren't even talking about this 6 months ago. And now, Kosta, you and I are trying to figure out where we're going to put mom for the last part of her life. So it's like just having some empathy to really understand where the family's coming from and the level of stress, because we all still have all the other regular stuff going on in our life, right? The family, soccer practices, my job. Fortunately, I've been self-employed for a long time. I was able to get in the car and take calls and drive to Louisville 8 hours on a Friday and be there Friday night. And so that was easy for me to do that. But a lot of people, most people don't have that luxury to be able to do that. And so all this stress and then trying to get a house ready to sell it and try to do all these things and not even knowing, afraid to make a mistake, that can be paralyzing for families. And just having some patience with families, I think, is probably the biggest lesson. You got to get out of like, hey, what's in it for them and where are they at? Not what am I trying to accomplish?
And Ben, I will tell you, we speak to a lot of people on this show in the long-term care space, and it's always refreshing to see somebody that's taken another unique approach to solving this problem, because I feel like it's necessary for all of us to be kind of rowing and pulling in the same direction, because it's a gargantuous problem, and if we're not working together, we'll never solve it.
And that's one of the things I love about the senior living industry. Everybody's so collaborative. We're all working together to help the families and surround. We call the adult child daughter Judy, affectionately. What do we do to help daughter Judy? What are we doing to help with the senior? And what do we do with those resources? So we've just been compiling nationally resources that we don't necessarily provide the service, but if somebody needs legal help, we can connect them to an elder law attorney. We have national agreements with most of the placement agents all over the country. And so if somebody, says, I need help to figure out what's the best care community for me, that's not our lane, but we're going to introduce them to a placement agent that does it for a living, that we know we can trust. They're going to take care of the family. They're going to help them find that best place for their next home.
We always like to end the show with a call to action. What's your best advice for someone entering the long-term care industry as a patient, a caregiver, or an industry professional?
Boy, I could really make this self-serving and say that they need to get a copy of this, right? And I say that, and I say it genuinely because I meet people in senior living that don't understand this process, and they don't understand anything out of their small section of where they are, right? That's why care communities are referring people to Mom's House, because that's not their lane. They understand this piece of it. And this guide is a great guide for somebody that's new to senior living, that's coming in as a professional, that is a family that has somebody over the age of 65. This is a great planning and conversation and a tool. People have said, Ben said I had to ask. So I'm the bad guy, right? That's why the adult child was asking about having these conversations. For adult children and understanding this is where they're going next. And if we can really have these conversations and get people talking, so that book helps adult child, that book helps the senior to understand what's going on, and it's great for the senior living industry professionals. I had a lot of people look at this and give me input and help to put that together. It took me almost 9 months to get it kind of from start to finish and get it published, but you can find that on Amazon.
And tell me the name of the book one more time before we wrap up.
Paying for Long-Term Care by Ben Rayo.
Fantastic. So Ben, listen, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a refreshing, such a rewarding conversation. Thank you very much. And I wish you the best of luck, and maybe we can connect next time you're in Nashville.
For sure. Thanks a lot.